2 full months had already passed, and yet the world had not lived a single day of calm. From Los Angeles to Prague, from Melbourne to Taipei, posters, candlelight vigils, and signature collection campaigns spread through cities like a tremor that refused to dissipate. It did not feel like a memorial, but rather like a rising pulse, an insistence that something much bigger, much darker, was hiding beneath the surface. The atmosphere surrounding the case was not perceived as the natural mourning that follows a tragedy. It was something charged, unstable, almost electric. On the corners of Prague's Old Town, strangers stopped under lampposts covered with posters of Yu Menglong's face. In Melbourne, passengers stepping off trams walked past rows of overlapping posters as if the city itself were trying to speak. In the Ximending district of Taipei, an entire city block glowed under a gigantic digital screen projecting his image, a silent reminder that justice, whatever form it might take, had not yet arrived. People were not simply remembering a young actor whose life had ended too soon. They were responding to whispers that spread faster than any news cycle. Whispers about hidden networks, about power camouflaged behind bureaucratic procedures and bright lights, about money crossing borders without names or faces. The story no longer belonged to a single man. It had become the story of an entire system, one that was beginning to crack under the weight of global attention. Overseas communities acted, moved by aversion, determined grief. Chinese Americans in Los Angeles organized meeting after meeting, refusing to allow the story to fade amidst the algorithmic noise of the internet. In Southeast Asia, students pasted handwritten messages on public bulletin boards, words charged with pain and defiance. Even in cities where the actor had never filmed a single scene, people felt the pull of something unknown. The instinct that what had happened to him revealed a danger far greater than the world of fame itself. And beneath this public protest lay an unsettling question, because the answer was so relentless, so widespread, so difficult to stifle. The answer, as many suspected, was that the tragedy acted as a spark that fell into a room full of invisible gases. For years, rumors had circulated about the shadowy links between entertainment, political power, and cross-border money laundering networks, but they had always existed on a whispered plane, dismissed as exaggerations or buried under official statements. Now, suddenly, it seemed as if all those rumors were trying to surface at the same time. It wasn't just grief moving the crowds, it was fear. It was anger. It was curiosity transforming into urgency. Because if an obedient, hardworking, conflict-averse rising actor could disappear under such violent and inexplicable circumstances, what did that imply about the machinery operating behind him? But behind the glamour and the excuses, what really drives this crisis? We will analyze every detail, from the initial errors to the irreversible damage, to understand how the entertainment world works and how an icon is redefined. The world was watching and refused to look away. The growing swell of global attention didn't start in a single instant. It began with a pattern, small movements in scattered cities that slowly converged into a single voice. At first, the actions were silent. A poster stuck to a lamppost in Melbourne, a small flyer hidden between books in a Los Angeles library, a candle lit under the cold autumn wind in Prague. None of these gestures seemed extraordinary, but each transmitted a pulse of purpose, like weak signals emitted from different points in the world that somehow shared the same frequency. Soon, that frequency became stronger in Los Angeles. Meetings grew from a few people to hundreds. What started as a single vigil transformed into a series of coordinated events led by the National Committee of the Chinese Democratic Party, each more numerous than the last. 5 meetings turned into 6, and the 6th, scheduled for late November, was shaping up to be the most visible to date. Organizers handed out leaflets under the soft light of street lamps with Yu Menglong's face printed on them. His expression was calm, almost serene in stark contrast to the urgency growing around his story. In Prague, the atmosphere was different, colder, more fragile. Posters clung to walls blackened by rain, layered over one another so densely that each new paper was marked with the shape of the previous one. The narrow streets of the Old Town, usually packed with tourists, now held a silent tension. Residents and travelers stopped before columns of images and handwritten notes, reading the lines as if deciphering a message hidden in plain sight across continents. They whispered the same question: what really happened to him? In Taipei, that question transformed into action. Yu Menglong, usually a vibrant storm of neon lights and street performers, became the stage for a peaceful but firm gathering. A digital screen illuminated the night with his photograph, creating a strange and moving contrast between public spectacle and intimate mourning. Someone in the crowd murmured, "This is the difference between a democratic society and a dictatorship." Their voice expressed not anger, but a quiet certainty, the kind that remains long after the sound has faded. However, the deepest change began in a smaller place, within conversations that no one expected to ignite anything. In a Taiwanese office, a woman explained the story to her colleague from mainland China, someone who normally avoided political topics. But when clients from the United States and Japan mentioned the case, curiosity replaced caution. She listened, hesitated, and then asked how to sign the petition. Later that same day, she urged other coworkers to join. That is how movements are born, not just through megaphones, but through private and silent awakenings. The petition surpassed 680,000 signatures, a surprising figure considering that information was heavily censored inside China. Each new signature felt like a challenge thrown against an invisible force, one that seemed determined to bury the truth before it could breathe. But support alone did not explain the momentum behind this global outcry. The true flashpoint came with the disturbing claims that followed. Rumors emerged that Yu had not only suffered hematomas, but had endured unimaginable torments: severed vocal cords, broken legs, his hair turning white due to prolonged stress. These statements were impossible to confirm, but they spread faster than denial could contain them. People were not just mourning, they were reacting to the horror implied in those details. Then came the accusation that shocked many. Celebrities, who once called him brother, chose silence when a single post from them could have saved him. Screenshots reappeared showing him eating a bowl of watery noodles during a shoot, a symbol of the humble obedience that defined his public image. He described himself as someone who eats what they give him, and someone who doesn't dare get angry when woken at midnight to work. These glimpses of his humility only sharpened the contrast between who he was and the brutality he allegedly faced. For many, this disparity was the true root of the public outburst. An obedient young man navigating an industry rife with unwritten rules and invisible hierarchies, suddenly crushed by forces much larger than himself. It was the revelation that no amount of compliance can guarantee safety within a structure built on fear and silence. And beneath the surface, another suspicion simmered. Perhaps those at the very top had more to lose than anyone dared to admit. Tianyedia, his agency, became the subject of intense scrutiny as whispers linked it to powerful circles within the political system. When reports surfaced that Kai Chi, a high-ranking figure, had been missing for days, speculation spread like a storm cloud. A high-level official was found dead under unclear circumstances, and in the shadows of Sunshine Shandong, a truck transporting 3 large sealed bags entered the complex before dawn to abandon it. Minutes later, under the energetic reprimand of someone caught on camera. Every detail fed the growing sense that the truth was hidden within the folds of something immense, something intertwined with money, influence, and long-standing alliances. The world no longer faced a single tragedy, but a mystery woven into the structure of a much larger machine. And with each new revelation, the public seemed to strengthen its resolve, refusing to let this story disappear. What do you think of this? Comment below so we can continue with the unfinished stories. The moment the first fragments of information emerged on the internet, the story broke its borders. It no longer belonged to a single nation, a single community, or even a single truth. It became a living organism, multiplying through every corner of the web, transforming each time it passed through other hands. In a matter of hours, the tragedy had grown too big to suppress, too loud to hide. The world had entered a phase where silence felt suspicious, and every sudden disappearance, every deleted post, added fuel to the fire. Social networks turned into battlefields, with each side convinced they were fighting for what remained of reality. On one side, those who insisted that Yu Menglong's fate was no accident, and that the details, though fragmented, coincided too much with patterns seen before, patterns of censorship, intimidation, and unexplained disappearances that resonate in China's recent history. They pointed to the abrupt freezing of his dramas, the collapse of Mango Supermedia's stock value, and the unsettling synchronicity of official statements apparently designed to provoke confusion rather than clarity. Others observed the chaos and warned about misinformation as an independent monster. They called for prudence, remembering that grief could easily transform into misperception. But even among the skeptics, an uneasy consensus emerged. The event had overflowed the borders of a normal celebrity tragedy. Something was wrong. Something seemed to be deliberately hidden, and that discomfort transcended political ideology, personal upbringing, and national identity. The pressure increased rapidly. Every new rumor, every leaked video, every screenshot of a deleted post generated aftershocks. When reports surfaced that Kai Chi, a high-ranking figure, had not been seen for days, the internet exploded. Some dismissed the story as sensationalism. Others took it as proof that the ground beneath the political elite was giving way. When the sudden death of Dong Yun within the Beijing public security system later became known, the fracture intensified. Some whispered cover-up, while others implored preferring concrete evidence before drawing conclusions. But the internet was no longer waiting for confirmations. It was already building its own version. The video from Sunshine Shandong became a turning point. An oversized truck passed through the gates of the luxury residence, an area known for its strict access restrictions. No truck had permission to enter, and yet there it was, moving with a strange and deliberate urgency. The footage captured the instant 3 oversized black bags were unloaded as the truck backed up. The neighbor who recorded the moment was met with severe shouting from off-camera. The tones were sharp, anxious, almost desperate, as if they feared exposure more than the act itself. People replayed the clip over and over, searching for details hidden among shadows and angles. Every frozen frame became a theory, every fragment of audio an argument. It was no longer about what could be proved, but about what seemed impossible to explain. And amidst this global storm, the entertainment industry remained disturbingly silent. The silence of major celebrities, those who once chatted with him backstage, those who publicly called him brother, transformed into a form of accusation. Their inaction not only disappointed fans, it became a symbol of something deeper, something structural. If powerful voices with millions of followers remained motionless while a colleague's story dissolved into the cracks of censorship, what did this imply about the forces holding them back? Sponsors and corporations were trapped in the eye of the hurricane. Mango Supermedia, once synonymous with glossy productions and mainstream success, saw its stock value plummet. Investors panicked. Forums erupted with speculation about inside knowledge and financial networks. Screenshots of crashing charts circulated as warnings of the future. They wondered if the company was pulling back to avoid implications or if it was equally entangled in the shadows of the case. Meanwhile, the Chinese diaspora watched the situation from another angle. Many had left China in search of freer lives, and yet this story reminded them how fragile the truth remains, even oceans away. For them, the media avalanche was not just a spectacle, it was a confrontation with history repeating itself. They recognized the pattern: a tragedy, a sudden silence, a chain of technical errors removing posts, and the abrupt erasure of a person's digital footprint. Too familiar, too rehearsed. Influencers, journalists, and amateur investigators amplified the story in multiple languages and platforms. Some focused on timeline inconsistencies, others traced alleged connections between Yu's agency and political elites. Many analyzed the symbolism behind the candle icon on Baidu, which silently accumulated hundreds of thousands of tributes while officials kept quiet. Every corner of the internet contributed to building a narrative, one that no authority could completely control. And amidst the chaos, something became undeniable. The public was no longer asking if something had gone terribly wrong. They were asking how deep the damage was and who should answer for it. The avalanche showed no signs of slowing down. It engulfed corporations, reshaped public opinion, and pushed the case to the center of global discourse, where it could no longer be dismissed as a rumor. The world had seen too much. Even skeptics admitted that too many events coincided in ways impossible to consider coincidence. What started as a tragedy had become a mirror reflecting the instability of an entire system, one shaking under the weight of its own secrets. The more investigators and digital communities dug, the stranger the landscape became. It no longer looked like an entertainment scandal or a simple political stumble. It was something else, something extensive, interconnected, and disturbingly organized. The scattered fragments of information began to form the silhouette of a much larger machinery than expected. A machine with many hands and many shadows stretching across borders, industries, and years. At the center of that machinery was money, enormous amounts flowing silently through channels designed to leave no trace. It started with whispers that entertainment companies were being used as fronts for international transfers. Names formerly associated with prestige suddenly appeared linked to accusations of laundering funds from fraudulent operations in Southeast Asia. The accusations were too complex to dismiss as coincidence. It was said that Xing and Limin controlled networks of influence built upon hospital systems, tech companies, financial institutions, and even charitable organizations that presented themselves as saviors while channeling resources into dark domains. Some believe that Yu Menglong had seen something, perhaps a document, an encrypted message, or a shipment that didn't match the paperwork, something insignificant to others, but catastrophic for those who depended on secrecy to survive. And once that suspicion took shape on the internet, the story transformed again, twisting until it became a revelation that many feared to contemplate. People began investigating historical cases of disappearances linked to Belt and Road projects in Southeast Asia. Reports resurfaced describing scam complexes fueled by private power sources, protected by layers of intermediaries so dense that no government could assign clear responsibility. It was said that these facilities relied on Chinese political protection to operate off the radar, trading lives for money. It was claimed that the infrastructure behind these operations stretched from Cambodia to Myanmar, from Laos to Malaysia, each node connected by streams of money and mutual silence. Then came claims that pushed the story into its darkest territory. They didn't arise from a single source, but from a pattern of testimonies, each more chilling than the last. Some described forced pregnancies destined for the extraction of biological material. Others spoke of young people kidnapped in border cities, never seen again, their disappearances classified as runaway cases. Stories circulated about rejuvenation injections, whispered among wealthy elites, each sold for unimaginable figures and allegedly composed of elements no one dared to verify. The more it was investigated, the more each missing person seemed to carry a question mark pointing to the same abyss. For many, the most unsettling detail emerged from a series of videos showing children's shoes being cut open. Inside the soles, embedded between layers of cheap padding, appeared small, silent chips. Discrete, capable of transmitting data that most consumers never imagined their footwear could collect: location, movement patterns. In some cases, according to tech analysts, even vital signs. Some dismissed it as paranoia, but when more videos surfaced, each from a different province and revealing the same hidden structure, the atmosphere changed. What purpose could those devices serve? The question resonated in forums, comment sections, and private chats. Some feared it was a surveillance tool to monitor political sensitivities. Others believed it was a way to track vulnerable individuals, fugitives, migrants, or children from poor families who would be least likely to be searched for if they disappeared. In a country where dozens of missing persons posts appeared every week, the possibility seemed too plausible to ignore. And in the midst of all this, the spotlight returned to the Prince Group. Chen Ti's indictment in the United States amplified existing suspicions. His connections to influential families in China, his alleged access to ministries, and his rumored role as a political and financial intermediary formed a web that matched the very patterns people were reconstructing. According to investigators and analysts, the group had allegedly operated for years as a political broker, financial messenger, and silent enforcer of tasks no one wanted traced back to Beijing. The accusations were chilling, but what made them impossible to dismiss was their coherence. People with no relation to one another, living in different countries and speaking different languages, were telling versions of the same horror. And through it all, the story returned again and again to Yu Menglong, Some believed he crossed the wrong person at the wrong time. Others speculated that he witnessed a transaction or overheard a conversation revealing the movement of funds between entertainment companies and offshore accounts. Some wondered if he had confided this information to someone without knowing he was marking his own sentence. Whatever he saw, whatever he discovered, it was something someone desperately wanted to erase. His obedience might have made him invisible in life, but in death, he became a symbol of a system that devoured those who generated profit for it. The more details came to light, the more the world understood that the story wasn't just about him. It was about the machinery surrounding him, the one that had operated in silence for too long. And somewhere behind that machinery lay the truth that millions now demanded, not because they believed they could defeat the system, but because they feared what would happen if they stopped trying. In the end, what resonated across continents was not just the story of a young actor whose life was abruptly interrupted, but the awakening of a public tired of the shadows. Yu Menglong's trajectory, silent, obedient, almost painfully humble, became a symbol of something much larger than the entertainment world he tried so hard to navigate. His silence, which was once his shield, transformed into the catalyst for millions of voices that were no longer willing to be quiet. The global reaction was not triggered because he was famous. It arose because people recognized parts of themselves in his struggle. They saw the vulnerability of someone trying to survive in a system built on control and secrecy. They saw the fear of speaking out, the fear of stepping out of line, the fear of being seen by incomprehensible forces. For many, his story became a mirror reflecting the fragility of any ordinary person living under the weight of invisible powers. Although the world demanded answers, the truth remained tangled in political webs, financial arteries, and structures designed to thrive without transparency. The evidence was scattered, witnesses disappeared, and officials continued their dance of denial. But the lack of closure did not weaken the movement. If anything, it strengthened it. People understood that sometimes injustice is not revealed in a dramatic confession. Sometimes it is revealed in the relentless pattern of silence. And that silence had become too deafening to ignore. Parents in Southeast Asia began checking their children's belongings with trembling hands. Activists warned their communities to stay alert. Investigators, journalists, and ordinary citizens continued tracing the threads connecting financial institutions, entertainment agencies, and criminal organizations operating under diplomatic umbrellas. Each new discovery, however small, became a flare launched into the sky, illuminating a system that depended on darkness to exist. And amidst the fear, something else emerged. Unity. People who had never met, who spoke different languages and lived in different time zones, aligned around a shared conviction. No one should simply disappear without explanation. No industry, government, or organization should have enough power to erase a person's story. Yu Menglong's name, once known only to fans of his dramas, transformed into a global signal, not of martyrdom, but of awareness. A reminder that even the quietest life can ignite a movement that refuses to die. His final legacy was not the mystery that followed him, but the clarity he left behind. The world is never as safe as it seems when silence becomes a tool of control. And so, with the weight of everything that has come to light and everything that has yet to surface, the message that continues to spread is simple, almost deceptively simple, but charged with a meaning born from everything that happened. Check your shoes carefully and stay alert.